And the manager says, "What's going on here?" And this woman said, "She won't let us sit down. We want to go to sit down." And I said, "But Mr. Batten," that was his name, Batten. I said, "It's Hitchcock."
For decades, Carol Burnett was known as one of the warmest, kindest figures in entertainment. Her laughter felt genuine, her smile disarming, and her generosity legendary. To audiences, she seemed incapable of real bitterness, especially toward fellow performers. But behind the scenes, there was one man she reportedly could not stand. Not dislike. Not tolerate. Truly hated in a way that surprised even those closest to her. What makes this story so unsettling isn't loud arguments or public feuds. It's the silence. Carol Burnett never aired her grievances on talk shows. She never launched public attacks. Instead, she did something far more revealing. She avoided him entirely. No collaborations. No friendly mentions. No nostalgic praise even years later. In an industry where grudges often fade, this one never did. While fans assumed everyone from television's golden era shared mutual respect, insiders knew something was deeply wrong. Tension lingered whenever his name came up. Conversations shifted. Smiles disappeared. Carol, normally gracious to a fault, would shut down completely. Whatever happened between them left a mark she never chose to erase. For years, the truth stayed buried under professionalism and politeness. The public saw unity. The camera saw smiles. But behind closed doors, resentment quietly endured stronger than anyone imagined. Only now are details emerging that explain why Carol Burnett drew such a firm emotional line. And once you understand what really happened, it becomes clear why she never forgave him. This wasn't ego. It wasn't jealousy. It was something far more personal. To understand why Carol Burnett's resentment ran so deep, you have to understand who she was behind the laughter. Carol wasn't just a performer, she was a protector. Of her cast. Of her writers. Of the fragile, unseen people who made television work long before credit or fairness was guaranteed. Loyalty mattered to her more than ratings, and kindness mattered more than power. Anyone who violated those values didn't just lose her respect, they lost her forever. In the early years of her rise, Carol entered television with optimism and trust. She believed that talent, hard work, and decency would eventually rise together. And for a long time they did. Her success came from collaboration, not domination. She created environments where people felt safe to fail, experiment, and grow. That culture became her signature, even more than her comedy. But not everyone in the industry shared that philosophy. The man Carol came to despise represented everything she quietly fought against. He was powerful, respected publicly, and praised for his achievements. To the outside world, he looked like a professional peer, someone who should have been an ally. But behind closed doors, his behavior told a very different story. According to those who witnessed it, his approach to work was cold, controlling, and dismissive. He valued authority over empathy and results over people. Where Carol lifted others up, he pushed them aside. Where she listened, he dictated. And most damaging of all, he reportedly used his position to belittle those who couldn't fight back. Carol didn't confront him publicly. That wasn't her style. Instead, she watched. She listened. She noticed patterns others ignored. She saw how writers were spoken to, how performers were dismissed, how credit shifted quietly in one direction. And once she saw it clearly, something in her hardened. What made this resentment different from typical Hollywood tension was its permanence. Carol believed strongly in second chances. She forgave mistakes easily, but she did not forgive character. Once she decided someone lacked basic decency, there was no reset button. People close to her later recalled that she rarely spoke his name. Not because she feared him, but because she refused to give him space in her world. In meetings, she redirected conversations. In interviews, she chose neutrality over praise. In retrospectives, she focused on the people who had earned her respect. This silence confused fans and historians alike. Why would someone as generous as Carol Burnett exclude a major figure from her public reflections? The answer lies in how deeply personal the offense was. Whatever happened wasn't a single incident, it was a pattern Carol found. Unforgivable. There's also an important detail often overlooked. Carol never benefited from hating him. In fact, distancing herself came at a professional cost. The man she rejected had influence. Choosing not to align with him meant fewer opportunities, fewer shortcuts, and more resistance. Carol accepted that price without complaint. That choice reveals the depth of her conviction. In private conversations, she reportedly made one thing clear: she didn't believe talent excused cruelty. Success didn't justify humiliation. And power didn't erase responsibility. If someone crossed those lines repeatedly, they were done in her eyes, no matter how famous they were. Over time, others began to notice. Cast members who worked with Carol described her as fiercely protective. She made sure her sets were the opposite of what she had witnessed elsewhere. Respect was non-negotiable. Voices were heard. Credit was shared. And anyone who disrupted that balance didn't last long. In this way, Carol's resentment wasn't just personal, it was principled. She turned her anger into action, quietly shaping a better environment rather than seeking revenge. But the man she despised never changed. And because of that, the distance between them remained absolute. By the time both were considered legends, the divide was no longer visible, but it was still there. Unchanged, unsoftened, and unresolved. And the reason why Carol took it so personally and why she never forgave him becomes impossible to ignore. What finally pushed Carol Burnett from quiet discomfort into lasting resentment wasn't ambition or ego, it was something far more personal. It was the moment she realized that the man she had lost respect for wasn't just difficult to work with, but actively harming people who trusted him. And once Carol understood that, there was no turning back. According to those familiar with the situation, Carol witnessed behavior that crossed an invisible but unbreakable line. Not a single outburst. Not a misunderstanding. A pattern. Repeated moments where power was used carelessly, where voices were dismissed, and where vulnerable people were made to feel small. These weren't stories passed along through gossip. They were things she saw, heard, and verified for herself. Carol had always believed that comedy required trust. Performers had to feel safe to look foolish. Writers had to feel respected enough to take risks. When that safety was compromised, creativity collapsed. What disturbed her most was that the man in question seemed indifferent to that damage. He valued control more than collaboration, and once that became clear, Carol's tolerance vanished. What made the situation unbearable was how carefully it was hidden. Publicly, he maintained an image of professionalism and respectability. Awards, praise, and admiration followed him. But behind closed doors, the environment he created felt tense and unforgiving. People didn't complain because they couldn't afford to. Speaking up meant risking their careers. Carol noticed the fear before she noticed the facts. She saw how people changed when he entered the room, how conversations tightened, how laughter disappeared, how confidence faded. These subtle shifts told her everything she needed to know. Carol trusted those instincts, and they rarely failed her. At one point, she was put in a position where collaboration was expected. It would have been easy to stay silent, to tolerate discomfort for the sake of convenience. But Carol made a different choice. She declined. No explanation. No public statement. Just a firm, private refusal. That decision shocked people who assumed professionalism always came before principle. For Carol, professionalism meant protecting people. Those close to her later said this was the moment her feelings hardened into something permanent. Dislike turned into something deeper, something rooted in moral certainty. She didn't rage. She didn't retaliate. She simply withdrew completely, and that withdrawal was deliberate. From that point forward, Carol ensured her workspaces were the opposite of what she had witnessed. She became even more attentive to how people were treated. She checked in quietly. She listened carefully. If someone felt dismissed or disrespected, she addressed it immediately. Her leadership style became a direct response to what she never wanted to see again. The man she resented likely never realized the full extent of her feelings. Carol didn't confront him. She didn't warn him. She didn't seek closure. In her view, some behavior didn't deserve dialogue. It deserved distance. This is why, years later, when asked about collaborations or industry peers, her answers remained selective. She spoke warmly about those who shared her values. She avoided mentioning those who didn't. Silence became her boundary. What outsiders often misunderstood was that Carol's resentment wasn't fueled by anger. It was fueled by protection. She wasn't holding on to bitterness. She was holding on to standards. In an industry that often rewards silence over integrity, Carol Burnett chose the harder path. She let opportunities pass. She allowed misconceptions to linger. She accepted the personal cost of refusing to align with someone she believed caused harm. And she never wavered. Even as time passed and reputation softened, her position stayed the same. Forgiveness in her eyes required accountability, and accountability never came. So neither did reconciliation. By the time both were considered icons, the feud existed only in absence. No shared moments. No public praise. No nostalgic acknowledgement. Just a quiet, unmistakable divide. And in the long-term impact of that choice and why Carol never regretted it becomes crystal clear. The long-term effects of Carol Burnett's decision to distance herself from the man she truly despised are more revealing than most realize. To the public, it may have seemed like a simple case of professional avoidance. But in reality, it reflected the depth of her convictions and her unwavering commitment to personal ethics. Carol wasn't building grudges, she was drawing a line in the sand, and she refused to cross it. This choice shaped her career in subtle but significant ways. There were opportunities she could have pursued, projects, partnerships, and high-profile collaborations that she intentionally walked away from. Choosing principle over convenience was not a common strategy in Hollywood, especially during the era when she rose to fame. For many, avoiding someone of his stature would have seemed risky, even reckless. But for Carol, the cost of compromise far outweighed the cost of missed opportunities. Those closest to her say that her avoidance became a teaching moment. She modeled integrity without having to lecture anyone. Cast members, writers, and younger performers quickly understood that Carol's loyalty and judgment came with boundaries, and that those boundaries were non-negotiable. She cultivated an environment where respect was expected, and cruelty, no matter how subtly masked, would not be tolerated. Meanwhile, the man she resented continued his career, unaware or perhaps unconcerned that Carol had quietly excised him from her world. To her, that absence wasn't punishment. It was protection. She did not need to publicly shame him to maintain her peace. Instead, she preserved her energy, her focus, and her integrity. In a career spanning decades, that energy allowed her to thrive creatively and personally, without being dragged down by the toxicity she had witnessed. Interestingly, Carol's silence amplified the intensity of her feelings. By refusing to engage, she kept the memory of his behavior precise and unaltered by public narrative. Every slight, every dismissive act, every ethical compromise remained sharp in her mind. There was no room for excuses or revision. Her hate, or more accurately, her profound dislike, was purposeful and deliberate. This principled avoidance also reinforced her reputation as someone who could not be manipulated. In Hollywood, power often equates to leverage, and many learned the hard way that Carol Burnett could not be swayed by it. She valued fairness and kindness above ambition or notoriety, and anyone who failed to uphold those values was outside her circle permanently. Her choices sent a subtle but clear message. Talent alone does not earn respect. Character does. Even decades later, the effects of that decision resonate. Carol's work continues to be celebrated for its warmth, creativity, and professionalism. Yet, behind the accolades is a reminder of the cost she was willing to pay to remain true to herself. She never compromised, never publicly criticized, and never tried to erase what happened, but she also never allowed the behavior to intrude into her life again. In the end, Carol Burnett's disdain for this one man was not about ego, jealousy, or pettiness. It was about principle. It was about creating and maintaining a space where respect, kindness, and ethical behavior mattered more than convenience or popularity. And it's why, even today, her story carries lessons far beyond comedy or television. It is a testament to the power of boundaries and the enduring value of integrity in a world that often forgets both. Her choice to hate quietly, to act decisively, and to protect her world without spectacle remains one of the most defining, if little known, aspects of her legacy. By the time Carol Burnett had fully established herself as a legend of television, Her decision to maintain distance from the man she truly despised had become an integral part of her personal and professional identity. To outsiders, it may have looked like silence, restraint, or even indifference, but in reality, it was a conscious choice rooted in moral conviction. Carol had made it clear to herself that certain behaviors were unacceptable and no amount of fame, charm, or talent could change that. What stands out most about this long-term resentment is that it was never about revenge. Carol didn't spend years plotting to humiliate or undermine him. She simply removed him from her orbit. No collaborations, no acknowledgments, no references. Silence became her strongest tool. By doing so, she preserved her integrity and shielded her creative world from someone she considered toxic. And in an industry that often rewards compromise over principle, that is nothing short of remarkable. Carol's approach also sent a quiet but powerful message to everyone around her. Respect was non-negotiable. Kindness mattered. Talent alone was never enough. Those who worked with her learned early that she protected her people fiercely, and that anyone who violated trust or demonstrated cruelty would find no place in her circle. The absence of confrontation did not lessen the lesson, it strengthened it. Her example became a standard for how to balance professionalism with ethics, even when the consequences could be personally costly. Interestingly, the man she despised continued his career largely unaware of the impact his behavior had on her. To Carol, that was irrelevant. She had no desire for recognition of her feelings, no need for vindication. By choosing avoidance over confrontation, she maintained control over her own environment and priorities. She refused to let someone else's toxic actions define her emotional state, her choices, or her legacy. Decades later, the consequences of that choice are clear. Carol Burnett remains celebrated not only for her talent but also for her integrity. She created an environment where collaboration thrived, and she avoided entanglement with those whose values clashed with hers. Her quiet yet unwavering disdain for one particular man demonstrates a rare combination: moral clarity, self-respect, and emotional intelligence. In an industry often criticized for scandal and compromise, her ability to hold firm is remarkable. Ultimately, Carol's story reminds us that some conflicts do not need public drama to be meaningful. Sometimes the strongest statement is made through boundaries, silence, and consistent ethical choices. Her long-standing dislike was not born from pettiness, it was born from principle. And in maintaining that principle for decades, Carol Burnett showed the world that integrity can coexist with humor, kindness, and unparalleled talent. Her legacy, therefore, is twofold. It's the laughter and joy she brought into millions of homes. But it's also the quiet, steadfast commitment to protecting her values and the people she cared about. That combination of warmth and unwavering resolve is what makes her story so compelling and why the man she truly hated will forever be a footnote in her extraordinary life.